good afternoon, good morning to other people living outside the Philippines. My name is Adrian.
I'm Christine.
I'm PJ.
And I'm Sarah.
We are the English blog team. Welcome to another interesting and exciting episode here at the English blog, a blog of English teachers by English teachers and for English teachers.
And in today's episode, we are talking about intercultural communication. If you are a teacher and you want to communicate across different cultural contexts, this is the video for you to watch.
Don't forget, we at the English blog make customized lesson plans, give life and career coaching sessions, and we do produce weekly vlogs and blog content related to ESL education. So please send us a message at www.theenglishblog.com to subscribe to our website and to always know when our next vlog is out.
In addition to subscribing, you can find us all across social media. You can find us on Facebook at the English Blog for Teachers, on Instagram with the handle _English_blog, on LinkedIn, and on Twitter. And across those platforms, we post our vlogs and blog content. So hope to see you there. And don't forget to subscribe to the website.
All right, let's get to the first question. What is intercultural communication?
So intercultural communication is the study and practice of communication across cultures. So this is just a fancy way to talk about communicating with people from cultures different from yourself and communicating with lots of people from lots of different cultures that might be in your ESL classroom.
And of course, a follow-up question to that is, what's the impact of cultural diversity in my classroom?
So your cultural diversity definitely enriches your classroom and gives you so much more to work with and a richer experience overall for everybody in the classroom. Your culture affects everything about everything you do and how you see the world, and also how you use language and how you interact with people. So it's very important to be aware of it and to really understand the culture of your students, because it's going to affect how they approach the material, the attitude they have, the interactions that they're comfortable with you and with the other students. And if they have a different native language, they've got lots of different language transfer happening, and it can be really valuable to know what speakers of that language generally have issues with or are able to do in order to make it go a little bit smoother.
I would say that cultural diversity has a great impact on my lessons in the classroom. There are three ways in particular that it affects my lessons. One way is linguistic. When you have students who speak different languages and come from different cultural backgrounds, they can't really resort to their 1L when they don't understand something in the classroom. Maybe you explain something and they don't understand it, they want some clarification. If they are paired with students who speak different languages, they're forced to ask for clarification in English, and that's something that I really love. Another thing is, I would say, behavioral. I have some students that come from cultures where they are encouraged to be quiet and not really speak that much in the classroom. And then I also have students who are encouraged to speak a lot in the classroom and be active participants. And you have two different extremes of the classroom, and you want to balance that out. And a good way to do that is to pair them or group them together. And that works out perfectly for me. Another reason I like cultural diversity in the classroom is that you get to learn about different cultures, and the same goes for your students. Let's say you have Chinese students, they can learn about Japanese culture, or Japanese students can learn about Libyan culture. Libyan students can learn about French culture. And I've had all those nationalities in my classroom, and I think it's greatly contributed to their learning experience.
All right. And the next question is, How can I learn more about teaching students from different cultural backgrounds?
So hopefully you're in an environment where you can ask your fellow teachers who may have more experience than you for some lessons that they've learned from their own extensive experience teaching students from different cultural backgrounds. Of course, there's also no substitute for your own experience, because your insights are going to be unique based on some of the things that come up between you and your students. But we do have a few resources that can start you off. Christine, could you flip to the next slide, please? So we have a few resources here, and I'm going to allow Sarah to discuss the first and second articles with you, but I do want to point to a great book. So this is called Learner English, and this is the third one here that you see on the screen. So Learner English breaks down the language transfer errors that you might encounter based on the nationality of the student. It also outlines common grammatical errors and explains how they have transferred their own structures in their mother language to English grammatical structures, so that you understand that. And it also can tell you what kind of pronunciation difficulties students from each culture will have. Sarah?
The first two articles there are nice overviews if you're looking for a general introduction to what is intercultural communication. And they also have those two articles have really nice bibliographies themselves if you want to go deeper into learning about intercultural communication. It is a field that's growing and growing every day. So I have a more recent article from 2015. And then one that I thought was a nice general overview and an explanation of what this is and how it affects your classroom. So I recommend checking those out, especially the bibliography, if you'd like to learn more. PJ, did you have any other ways to learn more about it?
No, but if you do just want to familiarize yourself with your students and what are some of the major tenets of their culture, that always help you understand. And two terms you might want to consider when looking at different cultures: individualistic and collectivistic. So, or individualism and collectivism. And generally, the idea is that Southeast Asian cultures are more collectivistic, and Western cultures tend to be more individualistic. But you have to be careful with those terms. So I suggest that you do some research on those terminologies and observe how some of that might impact the behavior of your students, and then go from there. Thanks, Sarah.
Really interesting insights from my colleagues here. The next question is, how does a learner's culture affect their learning style?
Yeah, so just building on what I said, so just to give you a quick and dirty definition of individualism and collectivism. Collectivistic cultures tend to be more into collaboration. Okay? They don't really want to stand out. They prefer to do work and hand in work as a group. They might also be less willing to share opinions in a public setting. So, for example, the Japanese have stereotypically been labeled as a collectivistic society. And I said, you've got to be a little bit careful with that, because time is changing the society and introducing individualistic elements therein. So what I found teaching my Japanese students is that when they would get together in pairs or in groups, they would speak in volumes, in English, and they would not care how wrong their English was with each other. But when you would call on them in class, they would have very little to say, and they wanted to make sure that their English was perfect for me. So this is a dynamic, these kinds of dynamics are something that you might see play out. Adrian?
Yep, I totally agree, and I like that PJ pointed out the difference between collectivism and individualism. Last night rather, I was just talking to an English teacher friend from the U.S., and she pointed out how individualism is pretty evident in the Western cultures, and I totally agree that a learner's culture does affect big time to the learning style of students, because just imagine how history and tradition mold cultures of different people, right? So it affects not only the mindset, but also the heart set, because there's a certain expectations to what a learner should learn and how to behave in class, how to deal with different people, right? Because culture is how we do things around here. That's what culture is. And it takes a long time before you can actually change a culture or build new sets of cultures. So it definitely does affect the learning style of your students. So really do consider that. Next one is, are there any specific topics I should avoid? I would say if you're not talking about expressing opinion, and if you're not talking about these particular topics, then try to avoid engaging in conversations related to sex, religion, politics, those three, and sometimes also history. Like I remember one time that so I was teaching a certain group of students from a country, and then we were talking about a certain type of music from another country, and we know that part of their history, these two countries have had conflicts before, and we really wanted to avoid that because we don't want to get into a really difficult conversation on who's better or why did you do this to our country or stuff like that. So just be careful when you're delving into discussing those topics I mentioned.
Yeah, I would agree with Adrian about that. And yeah, and we don't think about it actually, that history is so closely related to politics, but it is. So to take a controversial example, I was teaching Chinese students for a long time, and we were not allowed to talk about Tibet, Taiwan, and Tiananmen Square. So the three T's. That gives you, yeah. So that gives you some idea of what might, the important thing is, if you need to be sensitive to people's cultures and what they believe, even if you don't agree with them. So the best thing to do is just to kind of take a step back and make sure that you're not displaying any negativity or favoritism towards certain cultures over others. That's another one I would tend to be careful about, because you might inadvertently offend them, and then they shut down, and that's terrible for language learning, because then they won't talk at all. So just be sensitive as a general rule, and like Adrian said, sex, religion, and politics.
Could I add it's not necessarily a topic, but it's a tip from personal experience. Be really careful about touching students and your interaction with them. A lot of cultures, you shouldn't touch them at all, and you really have to be careful if you've got some devout from a variety of religions students, and you can't touch them if you're a different gender or whatever. So be super aware of that, because that can really ruin the whole experience and put so many people on edge. And then, yeah, don't touch people, and don't talk about the big three. And I would say be careful talking about gender roles, just because I was a student in a class where it got really, really stereotypical and kind of misogynistic, which was not fun to be in that class. So be careful.
I'm learning a lot from you guys. Thank you for your wonderful answers. The next question is, so Sarah is actually hinting to the next question already. How should I adapt myself to the culture of my students?
Or whether I should adapt to myself to the culture of my students. And I think that may not be necessary. I think at the very least, you should have some degree of cultural competency, whether that's having some sort of cultural knowledge, cultural awareness, cultural sensitivity. You need to have at least that in order to deal with your students and have a successful classroom.
Yeah, that's the bottom line of it. Understanding, respect, and aside from teaching them what they need to learn from you, is unity and diversity. So that requires a lot of respect. And I've been teaching Tagalog to foreigners in the Philippines for around 15 years now. And when I teach them Tagalog, I make sure to teach them cultural sensitivity too, because they won't be building relationships with the locals if they're not sensitive to the culture that they are into at the moment, right? And maybe that is also why there's a lot of hatred in the world, because we say things like this culture or this kind of thinking is supreme compared to others, and understanding that respect, unity, and diversity, those are three key things to remember. You don't necessarily have to imitate the cultures of your students, but those three would play a big role in the success of you teaching them. Next up, what does it mean to be a cultural ambassador when teaching abroad? This is a big word, right? Cultural ambassador.
Yeah, so most of my teaching career has been abroad, specifically as a language assistant, or I should say a language and culture assistant, because that is my title. And when you do those types of programs, especially if they're a government exchange, but even if they're just a private language school, they want a native speaker, but they also want a native person to come into the classroom. So that is an important part of your job. And for that reason, it's important not to really, don't change who you are, don't lie about your life and your experience. Part of your job is to be a cultural ambassador. And so you're there to teach not only language, but culture and culture through language, so that everything is all around more authentic. And another critical part of that is, one of the most valuable assets that you give is, most people, especially children, which is what most of these governmental exchanges are for school children, knowing a native speaker and engaging actively with a culture is their primary motivation for learning a language. So it can really make them more excited. It suddenly makes it feel like it's not just words in a textbook. There's real life people in the real life world who you want to talk to, and music you want to listen to, and TV shows you want to watch. So that's where it's really important to be a cultural ambassador, because it's one of the ways to activate your students. And then also it's important that teachers really like it, their knowledge, since they're not American or they're not British or whatever, is that they may not know all of the different avenues in media to get authentic, relevant, current day sources. That's always what the teachers really, really love and ask me for. They love the advertising, just cultural knowledge that you can only have by being a member of that cultural group.
Being a Filipino American ESL teacher who teaches students from Japan, China, Korea, France, here in the Philippines, makes me really feel like a cultural ambassador in many different ways. As a Filipino American, I feel like I'm able to bring a lot of American culture here. And I know that the Philippines has a lot of American influence, as well as a host of other cultural influences. But there's nothing like engaging someone who was born and raised in a certain country to learn about the culture of that country. And at the same time, when I go back to the States, my last time was October of last year, I'm able to impart to American people a thing or two about Filipino culture. And they find that they really appreciate that. And it's really fun for me. As a teacher, I see my role as a cultural ambassador not only to impart knowledge about the Philippines and English-speaking countries to my students, but also to impart knowledge to my fellow teachers about the cultures of students that I engage with. And there have been times where I told a teacher, did you know that I learned such and such about Japanese culture today or Chinese culture? You have to be careful about that. And they would tell me, oh, I really appreciate that. I had no idea. I will be careful about that moving forward. So when you're a cultural ambassador, you're basically a liaison between two or more different cultures, and you should take that role very seriously. It's not just one way, it's multiple ways.
Yep. So coming from a team of international cultural ambassadors, we hope you guys learned a lot in today's episode, and would love to hear from you in the comment section what you learned from tonight and what's your take on the questions that we have answered so far.
Don't forget about customized lesson plan making services. We also do instructional design and curriculum planning, so something to think about moving forward. We offer life and career coaching sessions. We can do it one-on-one or groups. We are also producing weekly vlog and blog content related to ESL education. Please do send us a message at www.theenglishblog.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our website so that you can get interesting offers and updates, and also to make sure that you catch our weekly vlog every week.
You can find us all over social media besides Facebook, where you're probably watching this vlog. You can find us on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on Twitter. And there we post our vlogs and our blog articles. So check us out.
And once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. If you've learned a lot from today's episode, or if you learned anything at all, please leave it in the comment section. Tell us what you think and your answers to the questions that we've asked. And my name is Adrian.
I'm Christine.
I'm PJ. Don't forget to share our video.
And I'm Sarah. Keep checking the blog for new updates.
Stay happy and healthy and keep learning, everyone. Until next time, bye.
Bye.